desert cools and the night settles in, the Great Pyramid rises against the stars, silent, impossible, and older than the story we're taught. In this quiet, the cracks in history begin to widen. The stones whisper different truths. And tonight, we follow them gently into the dark. If you enjoy drifting into mysteries like this, you can softly tap subscribe. It helps these night journeys find their way back to you. Now breathe and step with me into the shadow of the pyramid. Chapter 1. The Night Question. Night drapes itself over the Giza Plateau like a velvet curtain, softening the desert's harsh lines and muting the world into a quiet, ancient stillness. As the heat fades, the stone breathes out the last warmth of the day, and the Great Pyramid rises from the sand like an impossible dream, too vast, too deliberate, too flawless to feel born of human hands. In that hush, beneath a sky heavy with stars, a question stirs like something alive. A question older than kingdoms, older than kings. Who truly built this monument that defies time itself? For generations, the answer seemed simple. Textbooks offered a neatly wrapped story, convenient and comforting in its clarity. It begins around 2580 BC in Egypt's 4th dynasty, with Pharaoh Khufu, known to the Greeks as Cheops, ordering the construction of a grand tomb to ensure his eternal passage into the afterlife. According to tradition, more than 2 million limestone blocks, each weighing as much as a modern SUV, were hauled, shaped, and stacked with uncanny precision to form a structure over 146 meters tall. The official version claims tens of thousands of workers quarried stone at Tura, transported granite from Aswan nearly 800 kilometers away, and raised this mountain of perfectly aligned masonry in a mere 20 years. It's a tale as impressive as the pyramid itself. And yet, when you start examining the foundations of that story, the edges begin to fray. The earliest written account doesn't come from Khufu's time, but from the Greek historian Herodotus, who arrived in Egypt roughly 2 millennia after the pyramid was supposedly built. He never witnessed its construction. He simply repeated what temple priests told him. Their stories included ramps, quarries, and decades of labor, but also spoke of mystical tools, winged devices, and rituals that supposedly lifted stone through sacred means. Those oddities, echoed in his writings, are often glossed over by modern scholars. Herodotus wasn't deceitful, merely a gatherer of tales, part researcher, part traveler, part myth keeper. Still, his second-hand descriptions became the backbone of every school lesson, every museum plaque, every guided tour. Then came the 19th century, the era of imperial archaeology. European explorers descended on Egypt, hungry for breakthroughs. Among them was a retired British Army officer, Colonel Howard Vyse. Driven not by curiosity but by ambition, Vyse sought a discovery that would immortalize his name. Lacking patience, he resorted to gunpowder, blasting through sealed stone passages in 1837, much to the horror of Egyptian workers who understood they were tearing open something sacred. After weeks of explosions, Vyse uncovered a narrow chamber above what we now call the King's Chamber. On the granite beams, he claimed to find red-painted markings, hieroglyphs, and a royal cartouche bearing Khufu's name. It was the missing piece the world had waited for. Vyse proudly declared that he had found proof. The pyramid was Khufu's project. Egyptology embraced his claim instantly. The mystery was declared solved, but sometimes the truth resists neat endings. Decades later, experts noticed strange inconsistencies. The red markings weren't carved, but painted, unusual for royal inscriptions. Some hieroglyphs were oddly spelled, resembling examples printed in a British reference book that Weiss owned, rather than authentic Old Kingdom writing. The pigment was unnaturally bright, lacking the microscopic fissures ancient paint would show. Modern testing revealed the paint lay atop quarry marks, meaning the symbols were applied after the stones were already in place. And yet, the world had accepted Weiss's discovery so completely that questioning it felt almost heretical. His narrative became the bedrock upon which all further theories rested. Meanwhile, evidence supporting Khufu's involvement remained elusive. No papyrus from his reign describes the pyramid's construction. No tomb walls depict the tools or techniques supposedly used. Even Khufu's statue, the only confirmed depiction of him, is shockingly small, barely 10 centimeters tall. For the pharaoh credited with humanity's greatest architectural achievement, the silence is astonishing. As more archaeological work unfolded, contradictions multiplied. The workers' village discovered in the 1990s revealed long-term habitation patterns, not a single focused 2-decade project. Hearths, pottery fragments, and charred remains span centuries, suggesting maintenance, rituals, and seasonal activity rather than initial construction. Then there is the stone itself. The base of the pyramid and the weathered enclosure of the nearby Sphinx show deep vertical channels, erosion patterns consistent with heavy rainfall. Rainfall Egypt hasn't seen since the early Holocene, thousands of years before Khufu walked the earth. Geologist Robert Schoch reignited debate in the 1990s by proposing that the structures may be far older than accepted. Orthodox Egyptologists countered with sand erosion theories, but the stone bears the imprint of water, not wind. Even Renaissance scholars sensed something unusual. John Greaves, a 17th-century astronomer, measured the pyramid with extraordinary care and found mathematical relationships too elegant to be accidental. To him, the pyramid felt less like a tomb and more like a monument of knowledge. And so the question returns, pressing against the quiet desert air. What if the story we've been told is incomplete? What if the truth is older, stranger, and deeper than we imagined? The night deepens. The pyramid stands silent, and the mystery waits. Chapter 2. Herodotus's Whisper. Dawn glides softly across the desert, brushing the Giza Plateau with the cool light of early morning. The shadows retreat slowly, revealing once more the Great Pyramid, its base so perfectly aligned that modern engineers, like Flinders Petrie in the early 20th century, marveled at how the entire structure deviates by less than 2 centimeters from corner to corner. In the quiet hush of this awakening landscape, the ancient stones seem to murmur their own truth, a truth untouched by the stories scribes and scholars have tried to pin upon them. The more researchers studied those stones, the more the familiar tale, one of simple copper chisels, enslaved laborers, and ingenious pharaohs, began to feel like a comforting myth rather than a reconstruction of reality. But myths linger because they are easier to hold on to than the vast, unsettling possibility of forgotten knowledge. The official narrative survived not because it was airtight, but because it was repeated endlessly. Museums, scholars, tour guides, generation after generation echoing the same version until doubt itself began to feel like rebellion. Yet the stones are patient. They have no allegiance to pride or academia. Their surfaces, scarred by time and weather, whisper of an older story, one that begins not with a king's grandeur, but with a void where proof should exist but doesn't. To understand that silence, we must return to the very markings that supposedly clinched the identity of the Great Pyramid's builder. the red-painted symbols that Colonel Howard Weiss claimed to discover in 1837. For many, that discovery became the foundation of certainty. But when examined closely, the narrative around those markings begins to unravel like a confession whispered too late. The man behind that confession, Colonel Richard William Howard Weiss, was no archaeologist. He was a wealthy British officer desperate to secure a legacy before his fortune and opportunity slipped through his fingers. In the 1830s, Egypt was the promised land of fame seekers, a place where glory was carved from sand and sold to European museums. Adventurers like Giovanni Belzoni, once a circus strongman, had become heroes of the age by carting colossal statues and mummies back to London. Weiss wanted that same immortality. But when he arrived at Giza, he found a formidable rival already at work, the experienced explorer Giovanni Caviglia. Backed by local authorities, Caviglia had begun surveying the pyramid's interior. Weiss, unable to bear being overshadowed, used his wealth to overtake and eventually push Caviglia aside entirely. He seized control of the site with the forcefulness of a general claiming a besieged fortress. What followed was not exploration, it was assault. In his own publication, Operations Carried On at the Pyramids of Gizeh, 1840, Weiss recounts the use of gunpowder to blast through sealed passages, rupturing ancient granite with violent detonations, dust-filled chambers that had slept untouched for thousands of years. Later archaeologists viewed his methods as reckless, almost barbaric. But Weiss didn't care. He wanted results, and he wanted them fast. Yet as months slipped by, nothing surfaced, no inscriptions, no artifacts, no evidence that would place his name proudly beside the great discoverers of his era. His funds dwindled. His credibility wavered. Then, almost as if fate stepped in, came late March of 1837. While tunneling above what we now call the King's Chamber, Weiss's team broke into a series of small attic-like spaces, later known as the relieving chambers. Their purpose was architectural, designed to disperse the pyramid's immense weight. But on the beams of the highest chamber, Campbell's Chamber, Weiss's men reported faint red markings, crude inscriptions, graffiti-like strokes, and among them, an oval royal name, the Cartouche of Khnum Khufu. Suddenly the narrative shifted. Weiss announced his discovery triumphantly. Newspapers across Europe hailed him as the man who had finally cracked the riddle of the pyramid's builder. Egyptology embraced the find instantly. After centuries of uncertainty, they had their answer, and they were eager to move on. But even in those early days, something felt off. These symbols weren't carved with the precision expected of royal inscriptions. They were painted unevenly, sloppily, as though rushed. Some overlapped the quarry lines etched into the stones, meaning they must have been applied after the blocks were put in place. Others contained anachronistic spelling errors. The hieroglyph used for Khufu's name was written with a symbol that didn't exist during his reign, but did appear in a British reference book published shortly before the discovery, a book Weiss owned. Modern researchers, Zechariah Sitchin, Scott Crichton, and others, have scrutinized high-resolution images, tracings, and pigment samples. Their findings paint a troubling picture, brushstrokes inconsistent with ancient techniques, red pigment resting above layers of dust rather than beneath them, paint that shows no natural mineral aging. Some symbols appear cut off, as if painted from awkward angles on scaffolding. Others lie beneath chisel lines created during Weiss's own tunneling, suggesting the marks were added first, then carved around. Most suspicious of all is the silence of Weiss's own workers. Their initial field notes never mention a cartouche. The first detailed reference appears only later, in Weiss's personal journal, written after he had dismissed several key assistants, including those who had first entered the chamber. Piece by piece, a pattern emerges, not of triumphant discovery, but of a man cornered by failure, desperate to create the breakthrough he could not find. The Great Pyramid remained silent, but Weiss filled the silence. Chapter 3. Weiss's red marks. On that dim and restless night in 1837, Colonel Howard Weiss must have felt the weight of failure pressing against his ribs. Funds were drying up, rival explorers mocked him, and time was slipping through his fingers like the desert sand beneath his boots. In the stillness of the Giza Plateau, he must have realized that his chance at fame, perhaps his only one, was evaporating. And then, somewhere between desperation and ambition, an idea began to form. One stroke of luck could turn him from an overlooked amateur into the man who solved the greatest mystery of the ancient world. All he needed was a name, a pharaoh's name. A few hieroglyphs copied from a reference book, brushed on with red pigment in a cramped, lamp-lit chamber, and suddenly he would be standing beside giants in the field of Egyptology. If the markings looked ancient enough, the story of the Great Pyramid would be sealed for generations. Whether this was forgery or a misunderstood miracle of discovery, no court of law can confirm. Yet even careful historians whisper about the inconsistencies. Richard William Howard Weiss, Jr., the colonel's own descendant, once wrote that his ancestors' journals were riddled with contradictions and suspiciously convenient explanations. And while Egyptologists rarely air such concerns in the open, the unease has never fully faded, because the truth is unsettling. An entire historical timeline rests on those red strokes. If the name Khufu inside the pyramid is genuine, then the monument neatly fits into the 4th dynasty around 2500 BCE. But if those markings were added later, if they were truly Victorian inventions, then the pyramid becomes unanchored in time. It could drift thousands of years backward, into eras we barely understand. And that possibility is something orthodox archaeology has long preferred to avoid. Then in 2011, high-resolution digital photogrammetry allowed researchers to re-examine the painted glyphs under enhanced lighting. What emerged was troubling. Under filtered light, the strokes showed a modern layering pattern, thin, inconsistent, and containing tiny brush fibers embedded within the pigment. Ancient artisans used reed pens or applied pigment with their fingers. They did not use fine camel hair brushes like those found in 19th century expedition kits. A mineral analysis added further discomfort. The ochre used in the marks held subtle traces of industrial iron oxide, the sort manufactured in the 1800s, not the naturally sourced pigments of the Old Kingdom. Yet when researchers pushed for additional testing, access was declined. Preservation concerns were cited, but the timing felt uncanny. Sometimes preservation protects the stone, and sometimes it protects a story. For now, the red marks remain untouched, sealed behind a narrative the academic world has long leaned upon. The irony is immense. Our entire understanding of ancient Egypt, its dynasties, its rulers, the very rhythm of its timeline, leans on a few centimeters of red pigment found by a man using gunpowder and blasting charges in his quest for recognition. If those marks are younger than the pyramid they sit upon, then every connected date begins to drift, sliding backward into a period that conventional history cannot comfortably explain. What was meant to be the final word on the pyramid's origins instead becomes the first clue in a much deeper mystery. Because once we accept that the authorship may not be settled, a more profound question emerges. When was the Great Pyramid truly built? To approach that answer, we must leave vice behind and follow the scientists who attempted to read time directly through carbon, through stone, and through light, only to discover that the Great Pyramid resists dating in every conceivable way. Dating stone seems simple until you attempt it. Stone carries no carbon, no organic clock. It is silent, ageless, indifferent to human curiosity. And so archaeologists have spent decades trying to coax a timeline from the materials around the stones instead. Mortar, wooden fragments, tools, relics. But every attempt fractures into contradictions. In 1984, the Egyptologist Mark Lehner led a team funded by the Edgar Cayce Foundation in the first major attempt to radiocarbon date the pyramid's mortar. Carbon-14 analysis measures the decay of radioactive isotopes from once living materials, bits of straw, charcoal, or plant fibers trapped in the ancient plaster. The findings, published in Archaeology magazine, seem to validate the conventional date, around 2500 BCE. Egyptologists celebrated, claiming the question had finally been settled by science. But a quieter reading of the data told a much stranger tale. Many samples varied dramatically. Some were centuries older than Khufu, others younger. One fragment drifted toward 3000 BCE, far earlier than the accepted dynasty. The team explained these inconsistencies away as old wood, organic material reused from earlier eras. A tidy explanation, but also a circular one. The dates were interpreted through the assumption that Khufu's timeline was already correct. Data that supported the known date was accepted. Data that didn't was dismissed. Yet science is rarely so obedient. Mortar represents repair, not original construction. Across thousands of years, the pyramid has been patched by pharaohs, caretakers, and modern restorers. Radiocarbon dating these materials is like analyzing the dust on your windowsill and declaring it the age of your home. Later studies in the 1990s only deepened the confusion. Researchers from the University of Zurich found spreads of dates drifting as much as 1,000 years apart. Some samples even predated what we consider the dawn of Egyptian civilization. When independent teams requested new material to test, permission was quietly denied. Officially, preservation. Unofficially, too many anomalies already. Then, in 2020, a discovery far from Egypt shook the debate anew. In a quiet room at the University of Aberdeen in Scotland, a curator named Aber El-Dani was cataloging old donations when she opened a small cigar box wrapped in a yellowed 1946 newspaper. Inside lay a thin piece of cedar wood, brittle and darkened with age. A faded label read simply, "Dixon Relics, Great Pyramid." This was no souvenir. It was a key. One of the 3 lost artifacts recovered from inside the Great Pyramid in the 19th century. A relic that could hold organic carbon. A relic that might speak where stone could not. And with its rediscovery, the mystery only deepened. Chapter 4. The forensic cracks appear. Long before modern science dared to question the Great Pyramid's age, a quiet discovery in 1872 planted the first seed of doubt. British engineer Wayneman Dixon had been exploring narrow, dust-choked shafts within the pyramid when he uncovered 3 curious objects: a smooth granite sphere, a delicate bronze hook, and a small sliver of cedar wood. The stone and metal pieces were sent to the British Museum, where they were catalogued and quickly forgotten. But the fragment of cedar, the only organic artifact ever found within the structure's inner passages, vanished into the haze of time. No one knew where it had gone, nor understood how vital it would someday become. More than a century later, that missing piece finally resurfaced. While sorting through old donations at the University of Aberdeen, museum assistant Aber Eldani opened a worn cigar box wrapped in brittle newspaper. Inside lay the long-lost cedar fragment, darkened by age but unmistakably shaped by ancient hands. With a quiet sense of anticipation, she sent the relic for radiocarbon analysis. What came back startled researchers worldwide. The wood dated between 3,341 and 3,094 BCE, 5 to 8 centuries older than Khufu, older even than Egypt's earliest recognized kings. Explanations came quickly, as they often do when established narratives tremble. Some scholars claim the cedar tree itself might have been ancient at the time of cutting. Others blamed contamination. Yet none of these answers fully accounted for the fact that this tiny sliver of wood, found deep inside the pyramid's structure, appeared to predate its supposed builder by nearly half a millennium. If this date is accurate, then the Great Pyramid doesn't simply challenge our timeline, it uproots it. And the cedar fragment is not alone in its quiet defiance. At Saqqara, the step pyramid of Djoser, officially older than Khufu's pyramid, shows erosion patterns strikingly similar to those at Giza, despite being made of softer stone. If two structures built centuries apart possess matching degrees of weathering, then perhaps they have stood through the same spans of time. Yet Egypt's dry climate cannot explain the deep, vertical channels carved into Giza's limestone. These grooves require heavy, persistent rainfall, the kind that last touched the region more than 5,000 years ago, when the Sahara was still a fertile savanna. Geological studies support this forgotten, wet epoch. Sediment samples from the Nile reveal ancient flood layers dating back over 7,000 years. If the pyramid's lower stones endured rainfall from that era, then its base may be far older than dynastic Egypt. Even beneath the sand, the truth seems to whisper upward. Heavily eroded limestone pavements surrounding the pyramid hint at long exposure to rain, long vanished from the region's climate record. Beside the pyramid, the Sphinx enclosure tells the same watery story. Its walls bear deep, rounded channels sculpted by rainfall, not wind and sand. Geologist Dr. Robert Schoch, after years of stratigraphic analysis, concluded that such erosion likely formed between 9,000 and 7,000 BCE, long before the rise of the pharaohs. If his assessment is accurate, then the Sphinx and the Great Pyramid may not belong to Khufu's world at all, but to an earlier civilization erased by the desert's slow advance. Orthodox archaeology resists this conclusion for understandable reasons. To accept these dates is to unravel not just Egypt's timeline, but humanity's. If the pyramid predates writing, predates the conventional dawn of civilization, then human history stretches not 5,000 years into the past, but perhaps 12,000 or more, reaching into the final centuries of the Ice Age, when coastlines drowned and global cultures reset. The question then shifts from who built it to a deeper, more haunting one. What knowledge were they trying to preserve? Attempts to date the pyramid through other methods only deepen the mystery. Luminescence testing, measuring when minerals in the stone last saw sunlight, yields inconsistent results. Some blocks appear older than Khufu, others younger. Even the light trapped within the pyramid's own crystals refuses to settle into a clear timeline. And so a new theory has quietly taken shape among researchers willing to look beyond convention. Perhaps the Great Pyramid is not a single monument built in one era, but a layered structure, its ancient core refurbished and repurposed by later dynasties. In this view, Khufu may not have constructed the pyramid from scratch. He may have inherited a structure already ancient in his time, restoring it, reusing it, and leaving his name upon it as earlier inscriptions faded. The scattered clues, the cedar wood, the mismatched dates, the erosion, and the luminous signatures collectively hint toward an older foundation, one that belongs not to one pharaoh or one people, but to time itself. And if its age stretches back into a forgotten epoch, the next question rises naturally. How was such a structure built? Because the deeper into prehistory we push its origins, the more the familiar explanations begin to unravel. Picture, if you can, the scene we've been taught. Thousands of laborers hauling stone beneath the unrelenting sun, dust swirling around them as drums echo across the plateau. The image is noble, human, comforting. But when the numbers are laid bare, the story becomes difficult to believe. The Great Pyramid isn't just large, it borders on the mathematically impossible. Standing 146.6 meters tall, covering more than 13 acres, large enough to fit several of Europe's most iconic cathedrals within its footprint, it weighs an estimated 6.5 million tons. Textbooks claim it was completed in just 20 years. For that to be true, workers would have needed to quarry, transport, and place 2.3 million blocks, each weighing around 2.5 tons, at the rate of one block every 2 minutes, day and night, without a single pause. Even with today's cranes, lasers, and automated machines, such a pace borders on the unimaginable. And yet the mainstream explanation insists this feat was accomplished with copper chisels and stone hammers, tools softer than much of the granite used for the pyramid's inner chambers. Copper's hardness measures only 3 on the Mohs scale, while granite rests around 6 or 7. It would be like carving steel with wood. The deeper you look, the more the cracks begin to show, not in the pyramid itself, but in the story we've told about it. And as the silence of the ancient stones deepens, one truth becomes clear. Something about this monument defies the world it is said to belong to. And so the question lingers, soft as the desert wind. If the Great Pyramid was not built in the age we think, then who built it and how? Chapter 5. The Pyramid That Refuses to Age. As the night softens and the stars settle into their ancient rhythms, imagine yourself wandering slowly through an old workshop lit by flickering oil lamps. Tools glint faintly in the dim light: copper chisels, stone hammers, wooden mallets, objects that once shaped the world of pharaohs. Yet as modern experiments reveal, these humble instruments seem almost helpless against the stones that built the Great Pyramid. In laboratory settings, copper barely scratches granite before giving up the fight, bending like warm wax under pressure. Experimental archaeologist Dennis Stocks once attempted to recreate the techniques attributed to the ancients. After hours of steady, rhythmic hammering, each strike echoing through the stillness, his team managed only shallow cuts into limestone. Granite, however, remained steadfast, barely marked, while the tools dulled and crumbled at their edges. To shape even a single granite beam of the colossal 80-ton slabs within the king's chamber would have required mountains of chisels, endless reforging, and months of painstaking labor. Repeating this hundreds of times pushes logistics into the realm of fantasy. Orthodox explanations often propose that the Egyptians used dense dolerite-pounding stones to break through granite. But dolerite itself fractures easily, and when engineers examined the quarries at Aswan, granite plains pitted with circular holes and long, perfectly straight grooves, what they found did not resemble the random scars of repeated hammering. Under magnification, these grooves revealed a spiraling pattern, a continuous helical descent, hallmarks of rotary drilling, not brute force. Intrigued, engineer Christopher Dunn modeled these patterns using modern manufacturing standards. The cutting speed implied by the ancient grooves suggested tools rotating thousands of times per minute, applying extraordinary pressure, levels only achievable today with diamond-tipped drills or ultrasonic machining. If ancient builders used nothing more than copper tubes and sand, as conventional history proposes, their progress would have been excruciatingly slow, centuries, not decades, before even the inner chambers took shape. And yet the stone chambers stand completed, perfectly carved, their colossal beams fitted with a precision that modern builders would envy. The puzzle deepens when we consider transportation. Many of these enormous granite beams, each weighing the mass of a locomotive, originated in Aswan, hundreds of kilometers to the south. Mainstream theory assumes they were floated along the Nile on wooden barges, but modern naval engineers who attempted to replicate such a vessel in the 1990s found that the barge splintered and sank as soon as 60 tons of stone were loaded aboard. The math simply refused to cooperate. Even imagining the stones somehow surviving the journey, the question remains: how were they dragged from the riverbank to the plateau's towering heights? Traditional explanations rely on massive ramps, straight, spiraling, or sand-packed. But these hypothetical structures would have been larger than the pyramid itself, requiring vast quarries of clay, tens of thousands of workers, and miles of dirt and stone. And yet not a trace of such ramps remains. Not foundations, not discarded debris, not the carved-out earth that should mark their creation. Modern attempts to replicate pyramid building further expose this paradox. In 1978, Nippon Television of Japan partnered with Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities to construct a modest 20-meter version of the pyramid using only materials available to the ancient world. The result was humbling. Copper chisels failed almost immediately. Stone sledges stalled in the sand. Ropes snapped in the heat. Workers resorted to pouring water on the sand to reduce friction, a technique depicted in ancient art, but the stones still dragged stubbornly. Eventually, the team abandoned the experiment, admitting quietly that even their scaled-down replica was impossible without modern steel tools and heavy machinery. And even then, the structure rose only halfway before the project collapsed. Against this backdrop of difficulty, the real Great Pyramid grows more astonishing. Its 4 sides each measure 230.4 meters. Yet the difference between its longest and shortest sides is less than 2 centimeters, a feat matching the precision of modern high-rise engineering. Its base is leveled to within 1.5 centimeters across 13 acres. Its orientation to true north diverges by just a fraction of a degree, an accuracy rivaling advanced aerospace systems. How did a Bronze Age civilization achieve what even today would demand laser equipment, satellite-based surveying, and hydraulic cranes capable of lifting dozens of tons? Some researchers propose that its geometry hints at knowledge far beyond the Nile Valley. When multiplied by a curious number, 43,200, the pyramid's base perimeter matches Earth's equatorial circumference, and its height mirrors the planet's polar radius. This ratio reflects not coincidence, but an awareness of Earth's curvature and scale. Yet no such measuring instruments survive from Khufu's time. No records, no prototypes. Only a silence as deep as the chambers themselves. Perhaps then, the structure we see today is not merely a creation of Khufu's reign, but the renovation of something far older. Ancient inscriptions from Saqqara speak of sacred plans from a first time, a golden age when the gods, or perhaps forgotten ancestors, created monuments using knowledge later generations tried to emulate. Viewed through this lens, the paradox becomes clearer. The Great Pyramid behaves not as a monument of its supposed era, but as a relic from an earlier world, one possessing techniques, standards, and understanding we have yet to rediscover. And the deeper we descend into this mystery, the more the old explanations fade, replaced by a single quiet realization. The pyramid does not simply refuse to age. It refuses to belong to the story we've written for it. Chapter 6. Rain on Ancient Stone. The Great Pyramid often appears deceptively simple at first glance, just 4 triangular faces, rising from a perfectly squared base. Yet the closer you move toward it, especially in the quiet haze of dusk or under the soft glow of morning light, the more its impossibility becomes undeniable. This structure doesn't merely rest on the Giza Plateau. It defies the limits of the age in which history insists it was built. Its precision, its geometry, and its enduring stillness whisper secrets older than dynasties, older perhaps than the desert winds that now drift around it. Stand beneath its towering sides and let the silence sink in. As you approach the weathered limestone blocks, your hand meets a surface far too smooth, too deliberately carved, to belong to the Bronze Age tools historians claim were used. What appears rugged from afar transforms, up close, into a masterpiece of alignment. Massive stones fitted so tightly that even a sheet of paper cannot slip between them. Scholars have spent centuries attempting to justify this level of refinement using simple tools and basic survey methods. Yet each explanation evaporates the moment it touches the evidence. The oldest major monument on Earth also remains the most technically flawless, and that contradiction haunts every measurement taken. When the meticulous surveyor Sir Flinders Petrie arrived in the 19th century, expecting crude adjustments and archaic inaccuracies, he found instead a mathematical marvel. The pyramid's base spans over 13 acres, yet the difference in elevation between its corners is barely the thickness of a thumb. Its sides align with true north with such uncanny accuracy, within just a few minutes of arc, that modern engineers armed with lasers and GPS still struggle to replicate the feat. The methods Egyptologists propose, simple plumb lines, ropes, and observations of the star Thuban, fail under astronomical scrutiny. In its era, Thuban sat slightly off true north. The pyramid does not. A monument older than many civilizations is oriented with more precision than observatories built thousands of years later, and the deeper the inspection goes, the more the paradox sharpens. The original casing stones, once gleaming like a white mirror under the sun, were carved with tolerances so tight that restorers in our time cannot easily recreate them. Some joints measure less than 0.5 millimeter, their surfaces polished so smoothly that they reflect light uniformly, like glass. A team from the French Institute for Research in Engineering and Construction studied surviving casing blocks and concluded that the precision equals what is typically used for aircraft components, not for millions of tons of stone heaved into place by hand. Beneath what we see today lies an equally masterful foundation. Ground-penetrating radar reveals a grid of carved bedrock shelves and interlocking terraces designed to distribute weight with surgical intention. This is not the work of accident or primitive guesswork. Thousands of years of earthquakes and shifting sands have barely disturbed the structure, evidence that its builders understood load distribution, thermal expansion, and structural harmonics long before these concepts were formally defined. Even the Grand Gallery, The soaring stone corridor leading toward the king's chamber maintains angles so exact that air can't pass through its joints. Its incline mirrors the pyramid's outer slope with perfect consistency, as if reflecting a deeper architectural philosophy. The corbelled ceiling, stone courses stepping inward with mathematical rhythm, demonstrates engineering knowledge that would not reappear until the 19th century. Then come the tool marks, those faint, spiraling ridges etched into the granite beams inside the king's chamber. Engineer Christopher Dunn, a master of precision machining, studied these marks under magnification and found a uniform spiral, evidence of a rotating cutting tool advancing at a steady rate. Such a signature aligns with machinery spinning thousands of times per minute. Copper tools filled with sand, which archaeologists often cite, fail to replicate these patterns. Modern tests show only disordered scratches, not the clean concentric rings preserved in the ancient granite. At sites like Abydos, the mystery deepens. Massive granite boxes carved from single stone blocks feature internal corners so perfect they meet with laser-straight right angles. Their surfaces are flat within 1/10,000th of an inch, a standard reserved today for aerospace engineering. Yet these objects are attributed to civilizations supposedly without steel tools, lathes, or precise measuring instruments. And still the precision doesn't end there. Every dimension of the Great Pyramid seems to follow a unified mathematical philosophy. The height-to-base ratio encodes the value of pi. The angles echo the golden ratio. The perimeter, when scaled, maps the circumference of the Earth with uncanny accuracy. These relationships are not accidental patterns. They appear systemic, intentional, and advanced. Mainstream archaeology continues to emphasize simple tools: copper chisels, wooden sledges, ropes, and pounding stones. But again and again, when modern teams attempt to use those methods in reconstruction experiments, from Aswan quarries to Saqqara to the ambitious Japanese attempt in 1978, they fail. Tools bend and break. Stones refuse to move. Precision cannot be reached. The more faithfully researchers try to imitate the supposed ancient methods, the more painfully they reveal that those methods cannot account for the results we see. Some engineers have offered alternative explanations, grounded not in fantasy, but physics. Perhaps abrasive slurry saws were used, copper blades guided with quartz, sand, and water. This technique works on small pieces, but scaling it to 80-ton granite beams becomes impossible. Others wonder whether the builders harnessed sound, vibrational cutting methods resembling early ultrasonic technology, which modern machines use to slice stone with surprising efficiency. No definitive answer survives, yet these theories mirror what the stone itself suggests. A technique beyond simple chisels must once have existed, and so the pyramid stands, serene and unbothered by the centuries, like an elder watching time pass. Rain, wind, heat, and cold have kissed its stones without diminishing the precision laid into every face. It is as if the monument was crafted to endure not just ages, but questions, unresolved, unyielding, and echoing with a sophistication far deeper than the tool's history assigns to its builders. The deeper we look, the more the mystery thickens, quiet and steady, like rain falling on ancient stone. Chapter 7. The engineering that shouldn't exist. As the mind drifts deeper into the mystery of the Great Pyramid, the questions grow heavier, like stepping into a dream where familiar logic begins to dissolve. Much of the technology implied by the structure seems misplaced in time, as though it belongs not to the 26th century BC, but to a far later age. Some researchers have even wondered whether the builders didn't carve every stone at all, but forged many of them using a forgotten kind of limestone geopolymer, a primitive yet advanced form of concrete. In the 1980s, French materials scientist Joseph Davidovits stirred debate by pointing out that certain outer blocks displayed textures, bubbles, and microstructures more in line with cast stone than quarried rock. If true, ancient Egyptians might have mastered chemistry at a level far beyond what history credits them for. But deeper samples, taken from the core of the pyramid, told a different story. They revealed natural limestone and granite cut from quarries, not poured into molds. And so the puzzle remained unsolved, floating somewhere between ancient brilliance and modern confusion. Perhaps, however, the real clue has never been in the tools or materials at all, but in the purpose behind the structure. The geometry of the Great Pyramid is anything but random. It feels tuned, calibrated, harmonized. Acoustic tests inside the King's Chamber reveal a resonance hovering between 432 and 440 hertz, frequencies tied to both musical tuning and Earth's natural electromagnetic hum. When sound enters the chamber, the stone responds like the body of a colossal instrument, vibrating in sympathetic harmony. Was this just a breathtaking coincidence? Or could the builders have purposely shaped the chamber to channel vibration, sound, or some form of energy we scarcely comprehend? Even the materials chosen appear intentional. The outer casing of bright, high quartz limestone once reflected sunlight like polished ivory, while the inner granite core, rich with quartz and feldspar, resonates and amplifies vibration. Modern engineers note that quartz under pressure generates piezoelectric charges, tiny sparks of electricity. If this property was invoked or manipulated, the monument may not have been a tomb at all, but a resonant machine built to interact with the world in ways lost to time. What complicates the story even further is history's backwards timeline. The very first pyramid at Giza is the most advanced, the most precisely aligned, the most structurally flawless. Every pyramid built afterward is less refined, looser in alignment, rougher in construction, less stable. Technology should evolve forward, not backward. Yet at Giza, mastery appears suddenly, fully formed, only to fade in later generations. This strange pattern suggests inheritance rather than innovation, knowledge passed down from a culture already old when the dynasties began, or perhaps rediscovered remnants of an even earlier age. Step inside the Great Pyramid and a different mystery emerges. The desert light vanishes instantly, replaced by a darkness so complete it seems alive. The air turns cool and motionless. Sound falls away until even your breath feels loud. Millions of tons of stone press silently overhead. Yet the walls, smooth, straight, and unnervingly perfect, offer no hint of soot or smoke. Across the long descending passage, through the ascending corridor, all the way to the King's Chamber, there is not a single trace of carbon residue. No lamp ash, no burn marks, no microscopic particles from flame. A stark contrast to other tombs, like those in the Valley of the Kings, where ceilings are smudged with soot from centuries of torchlight. But here, nothing. It is as if no fire ever touched these stones. The traditional explanation is the mirror theory. Sunlight bounced from one polished bronze mirror to the next, slowly guiding illumination into the heart of the pyramid. Egyptologists still mention this idea, yet physics quickly unravels it. Even when polished to perfection, bronze reflects less than half the light it receives. After only a few reflections, the beam fades to a dim whisper. In 2016, physicist Dr. John Baird recreated a scaled version of such a mirror system. By the fourth reflection, the remaining light was so faint it couldn't illuminate a worker's hands, let alone the precision needed to carve granite. And archaeologists have never found any evidence, no mirror fragments, no brackets, no fittings, that such a system ever existed inside the pyramid. Other theories suggest special oil lamps with smoke-free wicks, or fat-based fuels that burned more cleanly. Yet chemical analysis reveals a stubborn truth. Every flame, no matter how refined, leaves measurable carbon behind. And the interior stone of the pyramid holds none. The silence of the evidence is unnerving, which leads to a possibility scholars approach carefully, almost reluctantly. Perhaps light inside the pyramid didn't come from fire at all. In a chamber deep within the Dendera temple complex, far to the south, there's a strange relief showing figures holding long bulb-shaped objects with coiled, serpent-like forms inside them, connected to a box through a thick cable. While many experts see this as a symbolic representation of creation myths, others, including engineer Erik von Däniken and electrical specialists like Erik von Dan, have suggested it resembles a primitive electrical discharge tube. When researchers built a functional model using materials plausible in antiquity, quartz, copper components, and a mild acidic electrolyte, it produced a faint blue-white glow, similar to a low-voltage lamp. Mainstream academia considers this speculative, yet chemical tests in the hidden crypts of Dendera revealed traces of zinc and sulfur compounds, the same residues created by galvanic reactions. Whether coincidence or evidence, it hints at a knowledge of energy far beyond the simplicity usually attributed to ancient builders. In the hushed stillness of night, when the history books fall silent and imagination steps forward, the Great Pyramid feels less like a tomb and more like a monument built around a forgotten principle, a message encoded in stone, precision, and geometry. A machine whose purpose we no longer speak, but whose presence still hums quietly against the desert sky. Chapter 8. Ramps that break the story. As we drift deeper into the enigma of the Great Pyramid, it becomes clear that the standard tale of teams of laborers dragging stones up mud-brick ramps can't fully explain what stands before us. The deeper one looks, the more the story bends, as though the monument itself is quietly whispering that history remembers only fragments. The raw materials of the pyramid offer one of the first clues. Its inner chambers and much of its core are carved from Aswan granite, a stone rich in quartz and feldspar, minerals that, when pressed or vibrated, produce a faint electrical charge through the phenomenon we now call piezoelectricity. Encasing this granite heart is a shell of gleaming white limestone, a natural electrical insulator. In the modern world, engineers use this very configuration, an energy-responsive core wrapped in a non-conductive layer, to build resonant cavities designed to channel and intensify waves. And so the question arises softly, in the quiet of the night. Did the ancients understand this interplay of stone and energy in ways we're only beginning to rediscover? In 2018, a team of physicists from ITMO University in St. Petersburg, working with specialists from the Laser Zentrum Hanover, explored how electromagnetic fields interact with the pyramid's geometry. Their models revealed that at specific resonant frequencies, energy gathers not randomly, but deliberately, pooling within the internal chambers and even beneath the pyramid's foundation. Their paper in the Journal of Applied Physics didn't claim mystical power or ancient electricity, but it did confirm something astonishing. The pyramid's form naturally concentrates ambient electromagnetic waves, This doesn't prove that the monument ever radiated visible light, yet it opens the door to a possibility far more nuanced. Perhaps the structure was designed not to shine like a lantern, but to resonate subtly, silently, amplifying the Earth's natural frequencies. Evidence of this resonance is not theoretical alone. When acousticians tested the king's chamber, they found it responds dramatically to certain frequencies. The granite walls hum between 110 and 120 hertz, vibrating as though awakening from a long sleep. When these tones harmonize with much deeper frequencies, especially near 8 hertz, close to Earth's own Schumann resonance, the entire chamber becomes a living instrument. Under infrared cameras, the granite warms faintly with no flame, no torch, no heat source except vibration itself. To the ancient mind, such effects may have been sacred rather than scientific, a blending of sound, stone, and spirit that created not just illumination, but an altered state of awareness. Old Egyptian writings describe divine beings shining like light, and priests who carried the flame that burns without smoke. These phrases are typically treated as metaphorical, yet in this quiet retelling, one wonders whether they echo a memory of experiences rooted in resonance rather than ritual. Archaeological sites across Egypt hint at the same pattern. In the Serapeum of Saqqara, granite sarcophagi the size of small boats, some weighing 70 tons, ring like colossal tuning forks when struck. At the Osirian in Abydos, chambers carved straight into the bedrock produce deep, steady vibrations that linger in the air. Modern acousticians call these standing waves. The ancients perhaps called them sacred. Skeptics often dismiss such connections as imaginative leaps, but they overlook the extraordinary precision baked into the pyramid's architecture. Every chamber, corridor, and angle seems tuned, as though the structure wasn't merely assembled, but calibrated. Visitors who linger in the king's chamber today sometimes describe a tingling in their skin, a lightness in their head, or a flicker of brightness felt rather than seen. Whether psychological suggestion or a subtle interaction of frequency and physiology, the sensation is real enough to have been recorded again and again. The pyramid seems to interact with the human body in ways that slip beneath our everyday senses, and so perhaps the light at the pyramid's heart was not a flame to guide the eyes, but a resonance that illuminated the mind, a glow not of fire, but of perception, a means of seeing without sight. The deeper one explores, the clearer it becomes that the structure was never a mere tomb. Its materials and geometry follow patterns far too deliberate, far too refined to belong to simple mortuary architecture. It feels instead like a device, an ancient experiment in harmonics, energy, and consciousness, a monument built with a profound understanding of the earth itself. As we slowly step out of this resonant darkness and return to the sunlight, we encounter another mystery, one not of stone, but of names. Across Egypt's temples and statues, the hieroglyphs proclaim the deeds of pharaohs with flawless certainty: who built, who ruled, who shaped the land. Yet beneath many inscriptions lies another story, literally carved beneath the surface, a faint script erased but not forgotten. The Egyptians were not only master builders, they were master inheritors. They had a tradition for this: usurpation. To us, the word suggests theft. But to the ancient Egyptian, it meant continuity, stepping into the divine lineage of those who came before. Recarving a monument was not vandalism, but renewal. Through this cycle of erasure and rewriting, truth became layered like sediment. The past was never destroyed, only reshaped. Ramses II, known to history as Ramses the Great, perfected this art. Though he built magnificently, he also claimed wonders not his own. At Abydos, his inscriptions rest atop the delicate carvings of his father, Seti I, at Luxor. His cartouches replace those of Amenhotep III, whose colossal statues Ramses simply renamed. To walk through an Egyptian temple is to wander through centuries of rewritten memory, where each pharaoh's identity floats atop another's like a palimpsest in stone. And so, a quiet, unsettling thought emerges. If the Egyptians so freely adopted and rebranded monuments within their reach, what stands beyond their reach of time? What if the Great Pyramid, older, more precise, more mysterious than any structure that followed, was not built by the kings who claimed it? What if it was already ancient when they arrived, already humming with resonance, already waiting beneath the desert sun for a new story to be written upon its surface? In the next chapter, we step further into this possibility, into the murky boundary between what was recorded and what was merely inherited. 9. Precision beyond civilization. As we continue drifting deeper into Egypt's long twilight of memory, we arrive at another example of a story rewritten in stone. Even the majestic temples at Abu Simbel, long credited as the triumph of Ramses II, bear quieter truths beneath their surface. Behind the bold, confident reliefs celebrating his victories lies older, weathered workmanship. The foundations tell of earlier hands, earlier craftsmen, long before Ramses claimed the facade as his own. In his quest for eternal glory, the great pharaoh may not have built the past, only overwritten it, stamping his legacy atop the fading whispers of forgotten kings. And if such usurpation was common in Egypt's later dynasties, one must wonder gently, could it also have happened in the Old Kingdom? Could the practice reach back even to the time of Khufu himself? When we return our attention to the Great Pyramid, the silence around its origin grows impossible to ignore. The single direct piece of evidence linking the monument to Khufu is a set of red marks in a hidden chamber. Cartouches, discovered by Colonel Howard Weiss in 1837, hastily written, oddly spelled, and suspiciously modern in style, they have been the center of debate for nearly 2 centuries. Beyond these controversial glyphs, the pyramid offers no statues, no reliefs, no inscriptions, no papyri that name Khufu as its builder. For the greatest architectural achievement in the ancient world, history remains strangely mute. Meanwhile, the smaller pyramids around it, constructed supposedly after Khufu's reign, are filled with decoration, inscriptions, and clear royal identification. Yet the largest, oldest structure is utterly anonymous. This paradox has long puzzled archaeologists, and when viewed alongside Egypt's long tradition of rebranding older monuments, a subtle pattern emerges. The step pyramid at Saqqara, often hailed as the first pyramid, was expanded and remodeled by successive rulers. Beneath its renovations lie structures older than King Djoser himself. The Osirian at Abydos, an immense hall of granite blocks, rests nearly 20 feet beneath Seti I's temple. Its walls bear waterware far older than Seti's time, yet his artisans still carved their hieroglyphs upon its ancient stone, claiming it as part of their sacred complex. Even the Great Sphinx tells a story of layered memory. In the 18th dynasty, Thutmose IV discovered the colossus buried in sand. His dream stele describes him freeing the monument, awakening it from centuries of sleep. Nowhere does he claim to have built it. He calls it Horemakhet, Horus in the horizon, as though its divine identity had been established long before any pharaoh of his era walked the desert. To archaeologists, Such inheritance is neither scandal nor secret. Egypt's rulers adopted, restored, and repurposed their ancestors' creations as a matter of tradition. But when this same logic is applied to the Great Pyramid, the implications become profound. If Khufu merely refurbished or sanctified an older monument, adding his causeway, his mortuary temple, perhaps even a few superficial markings, then the pyramid's true age may stretch far beyond the Fourth Dynasty. Its original architects would have lived in a time already fading into legend by Khufu's reign. Ancient priestly writings hint at this. Manetho, the Egyptian historian writing in the 3rd century BCE, described a lineage of ages, the era of gods, followed by the reign of demigods, and finally, the dynasties of mortal kings. The earliest rulers, the Shemsu Hor, or followers of Horus, were said to have governed for thousands of years before Menes unified Egypt around 3100 BCE. The priests of Heliopolis called this distant epoch Zep Tepi, the first time, an age when the gods walked the earth and erected sacred monuments aligned with the stars. Modern scholars dismiss these accounts as myth, yet similar patterns appear in many ancient cultures. Mesopotamian king lists speak of rulers who lived for millennia before the Great Flood. Indian scriptures describe past yugas, vast cycles of civilization rising and falling long before recorded history. Such echoes suggest not fantasy, but ancestral memory. And so the quiet question rises once more. Was Khufu's Egypt truly the start of the pyramid tradition, or the inheritor of something far older? Through the centuries, the Great Pyramid transformed from a royal monument into a vessel for meaning. Greek philosophers wandered its passages in search of cosmic truth. Roman scribes treated it as a temple of ancient wisdom. Early Islamic scholars described it as a vault of knowledge built before a cataclysm. The historian al-Makrizi wrote that a king from a forgotten age erected the pyramids to preserve learning from a coming flood. Each generation rewrote the story, just as the pharaohs once wrote their names over those before them. Ironically, modern archaeology continues this tradition. We fit the pyramid into tidy timelines, accept questionable evidence because it comforts us, and declare the mysteries solved, even when the stones themselves contradict us. But stone does not flatter or deceive. It simply endures. The erosion, the geometry, the uncanny precision, these all whisper of origins older than Khufu's lifetime. The Great Pyramid is not an isolated wonder. It is the echo of an age erased, the surviving blueprint of a civilization that mastered techniques later dynasties could only imitate. And if Khufu did not build it, then who did? What knowledge did that vanished world possess to shape millions of tons of stone into a monument of impossible accuracy? To uncover that answer, we must turn away from names carved in later centuries and toward a different language, the silent script woven into the pyramid's dimensions, a language written not in hieroglyphs, but in proportion, alignment, and starlight. Under the soft glow of the desert moon, the Great Pyramid becomes less a tomb and more a theorem, a message coded in stone, waiting for the patient to read it. And so, we step quietly into its mathematics. Chapter 10. The Resonant Machine. As the night deepens and the desert cools, the Great Pyramid sits beneath a shimmering sky, ancient and unmoving, yet quietly humming with mysteries. Modern engineers, armed with lasers and satellite tools, once believed they were simply measuring a relic of the past. But as they traced the length of its base and compared it to its towering height, an unexpected whisper of mathematics surfaced. The perimeter, divided by twice the height, revealed a number impossibly precise for its era, 3.1416. an echo of pi accurate to 4 decimal places, a constant that defines circles, encoded flawlessly in a monument built from straight lines. And so the question drifts like sand on a midnight breeze. How did a civilization of the Bronze Age engrave such perfect knowledge into stone? The earliest written estimates of pi appear 1,000 years after Khufu in the Rind mathematical papyrus. Even then, those values were coarse, more guesswork than precision. Yet the Great Pyramid, far older, holds the true value woven into its geometric body. Coincidence becomes harder to believe, especially when pi isn't the only constant sleeping inside its design. For when modern researchers examined the pyramid's sloping sides, they found another ancient signature, the golden ratio, 1.618, a proportion found in the spiraling growth of shells, in unfolding petals, even in the structure of galaxies. Divide the slant height of the pyramid by half the base, and this sacred ratio appears as though the architects were merging the mathematics of the cosmos with the stones of the earth. To the builders of that age, such harmony wasn't merely clever craftsmanship. It was a sacred language. Geometry became a bridge between the human world and the divine, a way to express the unity of heaven and earth. And this language seems to resonate throughout the entire Giza complex. Satellite scans have revealed that other pyramids, those of Khafre and Menkaure, mirror these same harmonic proportions, scaled like musical intervals. Even the Sphinx, silent and stoic, sits aligned in perfect complement, as if part of a vast architectural symphony. The site behaves less like a cluster of monuments and more like a carefully tuned system. When astronomers joined the investigation, the puzzle grew deeper. The Great Pyramid stands at a latitude of 29 degrees, 97,924.58 degrees north, astonishingly close to the speed of light, 299,792,458 meters per second, matching down to multiple decimal places. The metric system didn't exist back then, and yet the alignment raises a curious eyebrow. Latitude isn't man-made. It belongs to the Earth itself. Whether this alignment is a cosmic accident or a subtle hint of ancient awareness, its precision is hard to ignore. And then there is the pyramid's orientation. Its alignment to true north is astonishing. Off by less than 3 arc minutes, a fraction of a degree so tiny it's nearly imperceptible. To achieve this, its architects would have needed to track the slow wobble of the Earth's axis, a phenomenon called precession, something not officially recognized until Greek astronomer Hipparchus described it 2,000 years later. Yet the pyramid stands aligned as though its builders understood the movements of the stars with uncanny clarity. Even the shape of the pyramid holds secrets invisible from the ground. Each side is subtly concave, gently curving inward by just over 3 feet. This detail remained unknown until aerial surveys in the 1940s captured the curvature clearly. Remarkably, the concavity mirrors the curvature of the Earth at that very latitude, as if the monument were shaped in harmony with the planet itself. It is a quiet message carved in limestone. The builders may have understood the Earth as a sphere long before it was officially proven. Inside the pyramid, the mystery grows more intimate. The king's chamber, built from solid granite blocks, follows a precise mathematical harmony. 10 cubits in width, 20 in length, 11 in height. A double square rectangle, a form known to generate resonant frequencies. And indeed, when sound is produced within the chamber, the stone responds. Frequencies around 432 Hz and 440 Hz. tones associated with earthly resonance and modern musical tuning vibrate through the granite walls. Temples across Egypt, from Abydos to Dendera, show similar acoustic design. It seems the ancients understood that sound, like light and number, has a language, and that stone could be tuned like an instrument. In 1998, acoustic engineer Tom Danley recorded unusual standing waves inside the king's chamber. Deep, pulsing tones formed invisible patterns, gathering strength in certain corners, thinning in others. To those who lived thousands of years ago, such vibrations might have felt like the breath of a god moving through the chamber, an architectural heartbeat. But the most astonishing harmony emerges when the pyramid is scaled upward. Multiply its height by 43,200, and you get the Earth's polar radius. Multiply the perimeter of its base by the same number, and you match the Earth's equatorial circumference. This number, 43,200, is not random. It connects directly to the 86,400 seconds that mark one rotation of the Earth. The pyramid, in its silent desert solitude, appears to mirror not just mathematical ideals, but the very size and rhythm of the planet. A monument that is also a model of Earth itself. And so the Great Pyramid becomes more than a structure. It becomes a resonant machine, an ancient blueprint shaped by frequency, geometry, and cosmic order. Whether its builders intended it as a temple, a tomb, a map of the heavens, or something beyond our imagining, its design suggests a worldview in which matter, mathematics, and meaning were inseparable. Under the quiet night sky, the pyramid still seems to vibrate with that ancient wisdom, waiting patiently for those who dare to listen. Chapter 11. Light without fire. As the quiet winds drift across the Giza sands, the ancient question resurfaces: how did a civilization so old measure the world so well? To encode the Earth's circumference, they would have needed to understand not only its size, but its roundness, knowledge later attributed to Eratosthenes in the 3rd century BC. Yet the pyramid predates him by more than 2 millennia. This leaves us with a lingering, whispering uncertainty. Did the Egyptians uncover these truths on their own? Or were they keeping alive a legacy from a civilization far older, perhaps one capable of reading the globe with astonishing precision? The pyramid's geometry hints at an understanding far beyond practical engineering. The angle of its sides, around 50 degrees and a fraction, echoes the tilt of Earth's orbit. Its long, unwavering alignment with the constellation Orion and the star Sirius recreates the sky as it would have appeared around 10,500 BC, long before Egypt's dynasties were born. The builders were not charting a moment. They were preserving a cosmic timestamp in stone, freezing a sky that belonged to a far earlier world. Even the constants woven into its architecture, pi and phi, carry deeper meanings in the realm of sacred geometry. Pi symbolizes eternity, the infinite loop of the circle. Phi represents the generative rhythm of life, the proportion through which nature spirals into form. Paired together, they suggest creation itself, the eternal guiding the living. Through this lens, the pyramid becomes less a tomb and more a universal formula, a reminder of life unfolding from the infinite. This idea doesn't stand alone. Across distant cultures, the same patterns emerge. The Mayan pyramid of Kukulkan encodes the length of the solar year. The temples of Angkor Wat trace a precessional cycle of nearly 26,000 years. The same numbers, the same alignments, appearing continents apart, as if the builders everywhere were following the same cosmic instruction manual. Modern scholars label these correspondences mere coincidence, But when coincidences repeat with such clarity and precision, they begin to resemble a quiet language. If the Great Pyramid truly contains the rhythms of Earth, the cycles of the heavens, and the laws of resonance, then it may be more than architecture. It might be knowledge preserved through shape and proportion, a scientific manuscript carved in stone, perhaps the oldest one humanity has ever known. A message from a culture that saw the universe as sound, number, and light long before our modern sciences rediscovered those truths. Night descends over Giza like a velvet curtain, and the desert becomes an ocean of silence. Stars spill across the sky in a brilliant sweep, each one a distant ember of time. Standing before the Great Pyramid in this hush, the horizon seems to soften and curve. The pyramid's apex rises sharply, like a needle pointing to the heavens. In that moment, an understanding stirs in the quiet mind. This place wasn't built solely for the earth. It was crafted for the sky. Ancient Egyptians called their homeland Ta-Meri, the beloved land. Yet another name lingered in their lore, Jesa, the holy land of the gods. To them, the sky wasn't empty space. It was a divine reflection, a celestial river mimicking the Nile below. And the pyramid marked the crossing point, the place where heaven reached down to meet the world of men. In 1993, engineer and researcher Robert Bauval noticed something unusual in aerial photographs. The three pyramids were not arranged in a straight line. The smallest, attributed to Menkaure, was shifted slightly south. Instead of dismissing this as a simple construction quirk, Bauval looked upward. He realized the same offset appears in the three stars of Orion's belt, Al-Nitak, Al-Nilam, and Mintaka. Overlaying the star pattern onto the pyramid layout revealed a near-perfect match. The scale, the placement, even the direction of the offset, it all mirrored the constellation. The Giza Plateau, it seemed, was a terrestrial reflection of the stars. Bauval then pushed further. Using astronomy software to trace Orion's position through thousands of years, he found that the layout aligned most precisely with the sky of 10,500 BC. A date older than pharaonic Egypt, older than the earliest farming villages along the Nile. A time marked by global upheaval, the end of the Younger Dryas, when great floods and climatic shifts reshaped the world and wiped out much of the Ice Age megafauna. This same era is connected to the enigmatic site of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, the eroded body of the Sphinx, and ancient flood deposits across Mesopotamia. Could the builders of Giza have been honoring not their present, but a memory from a world long vanished? Skeptics dismissed the idea, yet the evidence refused to fade. The brightness of each pyramid corresponds to the brightness of its matching star. Their angles align with Orion's position relative to the Milky Way. From above, the Nile flows across the land, exactly as the Milky Way crosses Orion in the ancient sky. A celestial river, mirrored by its earthly counterpart. Egyptians called that shimmering band the winding waterway of the gods, and believed that, after death, souls traveled along it, guided by Sa. Orion, the celestial manifestation of Osiris. Sirius, the radiant star of Isis, heralded the annual rising of the Nile and the rebirth of Egypt. Inside the Great Pyramid, narrow shafts project from the chambers. They are not random tunnels. The southern shaft of the King's Chamber aligns with Orion's belt. The northern shaft points toward Thuban, the ancient pole star. In the Queen's Chamber, one shaft targets Sirius and the other aims toward Kochab. These are not architectural conveniences, they are star paths, cosmic channels designed as guides for the soul. To the ancient Egyptians, The pyramid was not a tomb. It was a vessel for transformation, a machine of light without fire, an instrument meant to lift the spirit beyond earth. Its precise alignments suggest that whoever conceived it understood the sky not simply as worshippers, but as astronomers, calculating the heavens with breathtaking accuracy. And in the stillness of the desert night, one begins to sense that the Great Pyramid remains exactly what it was always meant to be, a bridge between worlds, a silent hymn to the stars, and a beacon of knowledge waiting patiently for those ready to listen. Chapter 12. Pharaohs who rewrote the past. To align the pyramids with such breathtaking accuracy, the ancient builders would have needed to measure star positions with precision, finer than a single arc minute, something our own world didn't achieve again until the age of Renaissance astronomy. They would also have needed a clear understanding of precession, the slow celestial wobble that takes nearly 26,000 years to complete a single cycle. Precession is imperceptible within a normal lifespan, its movement invisible to all but centuries of observation. So how then could a civilization believed to have emerged around 3000 BC have encoded a sky pattern that belongs not to their age, but to the distant world of 10,500 BC? A sky last seen near the end of the Ice Age. Only two possibilities linger in the quiet desert air. Either the Egyptians inherited their knowledge from an earlier forgotten culture, or the origins of the pyramid complex reach back far beyond official history, preserving an ancient celestial memory. Egyptian mythology hints at such deep time. In their cosmogony, Zep-Tepi, the first time, marked an age when divine beings descended after a great flood to restore balance on Earth. Osiris, the bringer of civilization, ruled peacefully until betrayal struck, and his brother Set ended his life. Isis revived him for a fleeting moment, conceiving their son Horus, who one day avenged his father and restored cosmic harmony. To Egypt's priests, the return of Orion in the night sky became a living reenactment of that myth, Osiris rising once more. It makes one wonder, could this beloved myth be a coded memory? A recollection of a cataclysm that wiped out an earlier advanced culture? If so, the monuments of Giza may not simply imitate the heavens. They might memorialize them, preserving the image of a sky that shone above a long-lost world. Astronomy strengthens this possibility. Around 10,500 BC, when Orion's belt aligned perfectly with the three pyramids, the constellation Leo rose due east, directly before the face of the Sphinx. The great lion-bodied statue, its form softened by ancient rains, may symbolize the age of Leo, echoing the same era in which the pyramid alignment achieves its perfection. Together, the Sphinx and pyramids seem to form a celestial time-stamp, a dual signature of myth and sky. This pattern isn't unique to Egypt. Across the world, ancient builders replicated the heavens on Earth. The sacred city of Teotihuacan in Mexico mirrors Orion's belt and the path of the Milky Way. At Napta Playa in southern Egypt, megaliths constructed around 6000 BC align with Orion and Sirius long before the reign of Khufu. These parallels suggest not isolated brilliance, but a widespread, shared tradition, a prehistoric science of the stars, a knowledge system that may have predated written history itself. Even modern scientists have been unable to completely dismiss the precision. When NASA astronomers compared the Great Pyramid's location, Earth's axial tilt, and the orientation of Orion, they uncovered geometric resonances repeating across scales, from our planet to the patterns of the galaxy. It was as though the pyramid encoded not only its place in space, but also its moment in time. Whatever the explanation, one truth stands quietly. immovable as the stones themselves. The Great Pyramid acts like a clock. Its design tracks not years, but epochs. Its geometry synchronizes with the heavens, marking ages like a cosmic calendar carved in stone. If it truly points back to the world of 10,500 BC, then it may guard a memory older than Egypt, a memory of a civilization erased from the surface of the earth, but not from the stars. And so the story leads us inward, into the silent heart of this immense structure, the so-called King's Chamber. Stepping inside, the outside world seems to slip away. The air feels dense, cool, and metallic, as though the chamber holds its own gravity. The granite walls rise in towering slabs, fitted so precisely that even centuries of time cannot widen the seams. There are no inscriptions here, no golden murals, no sacred texts, nothing to name the king or honor a mortal life. A single granite box rests near the western wall, lidless, hollow, waiting, like a vessel meant for something other than a body. Scholars long insisted this was Khufu's burial chamber, the culmination of Egypt's greatest architectural undertaking. Yet unlike every other royal tomb, this chamber stands completely bare. No ornaments, no treasures, no hieroglyphic spells. Just silence, deep, intentional silence. Some call it austerity, others call it erasure. But perhaps what we see here is purpose. The obvious contradiction is impossible to ignore. No human remains have ever been found inside the Great Pyramid. Not a bone, not a fragment of coffin, not a trace of embalming resin. The granite box, often labeled a sarcophagus, doesn't show any mark of use as a tomb. It's carved from a single block too large to fit through the pyramid's passages, meaning it was placed here before the structure was sealed. But if this chamber was built for a pharaoh, why leave no lid, no offerings, no funerary texts? Contrast this with the tomb of Tutankhamun, discovered nearly intact in 1922. Its walls shimmer with sacred art, thousands of objects surround the king, and the air still carried the faint scent of oils after 3 millennia. That is what a royal burial looks like. The Great Pyramid, by comparison, feels like something altogether different, less a tomb and more a precisely tuned instrument. Its internal layout does not resemble any known burial design in Egypt. The Grand Gallery rises like the interior of an enormous machine, its corbelled walls guiding the eye upward, as though meant to channel movement or energy. Above the king's chamber, 5 smaller, relieving chambers distribute pressure through layered granite beams, a marvel of structural engineering far beyond what a simple tomb would require. It's like building a fortified reactor to protect an empty stone box. The logic doesn't align. Then there is the sound. Inside these walls, acoustics behave in unsettling, mesmerizing ways. A hum, a resonance, a soft vibration that settles into the bones, as though the chamber is listening, waiting for a frequency it once knew. And so the mystery deepens, not in the sands outside, but here, within this quiet chamber of stone, where emptiness speaks louder than any inscription ever could. Chapter 13. The Mathematics of a Lost World. The deeper you step into the king's chamber, the more the outside world fades, until all that remains is the stone, and a subtle vibration humming through it. A single low tone, hardly more than a breath, ripples across the granite walls and settles into your chest like a second heartbeat. Modern acoustics reveal something remarkable. At around 440 hertz, the chamber responds with a clear resonance, but when the tone shifts down to 432 hertz, the entire room begins to behave differently, almost alive. Standing waves ripple through the chamber, traveling the length of the granite structure as if the pyramid itself is singing back. Microphones have recorded harmonics that mirror the Earth's natural electromagnetic pulse, the Schumann resonance, as though the chamber had been tuned not just by human hands, but by planetary rhythm. In the late 1990s, physicist Tom Danley mapped these resonances and discovered that the chamber amplifies low-frequency vibrations between 90 and 120 hertz, a range known to influence human perception. Those who stand in this room often describe gentle disorientation, an expanding sense of awareness, or even moments of dreamlike clarity. Whether psychological or physical, the effect is undeniable. And if such sensations were intentionally engineered, then the Great Pyramid may have been more than a monument. It may have been a resonant sanctuary where sound, geometry, and human consciousness intertwined. Ancient Egyptian priests believed the soul, the Ka, could travel between realms through sacred tones. Their rituals used specific frequencies to open doors between the physical and the divine. If that belief guided the pyramid's construction, then the king's chamber might have served as a kind of colossal instrument, harmonizing the human spirit with forces beyond the ordinary world. Yet the mystery only deepens as we descend beneath this chamber into the rough, unfinished cavern carved directly into bedrock. This subterranean chamber, asymmetrical and strangely raw, has none of the careful craftsmanship seen above. It offers no sign of ritual function or burial intent. Some scholars think it acted like a counterbalance, a resonant partner to the chamber above, while others suspect it predates the pyramid entirely, part of an earlier structure absorbed into the later design. The materials themselves add another layer. The granite lining the pyramid's interior is rich in quartz, a mineral known to generate electrical charge under pressure through piezoelectricity. Combine thousands of tons of quartz-rich stone arranged in exact angles and proportions, and you create something closer to an energy device than a tomb. Perhaps this explains why the inner passages show no soot or residue from ancient lamps. Some researchers speculate that the pyramid's natural resonance might have generated faint, shimmering plasma or piezoelectric light, enough for priests or architects to work by without flame. No certainty exists, but it hints at a world where physics and spirituality intertwined. This absence of carvings, inscriptions, or golden offerings, so unlike the extravagant tomb of Tutankhamun, may not signal neglect. Instead, it suggests that the Egyptians expressed their devotion through precision, not ornament. To the builders, symmetry and alignment were sacred language, and the Great Pyramid was scripture written in stone. Yet this view leads to a daunting question. If this enormous structure wasn't built as a tomb, then what was its true purpose? And if its acoustic and geometric properties belong to a level of knowledge far beyond the Old Kingdom, then who exactly designed it? By the 21st century, new technologies finally allowed researchers to peer deeper than ever before. Muon detectors, ground-penetrating radar, and advanced thermal imaging revealed that the pyramid's interior layout was far more complex than the simple diagrams found in textbooks. These tools uncovered hidden corridors, sealed cavities, and long-forgotten passageways buried beneath the centuries of stone. Then, in 2015, the Scan Pyramids project, led by scientists from Cairo University and Nagoya University, used cosmic ray imaging to search for voids within the structure. Muons, those tiny particles constantly raining down from the sky, passed through the pyramid and recorded subtle variations in density. For nearly 2 years, in silence and darkness, the detectors collected data. When the information was finally processed, it revealed something astonishing: a gigantic, previously unknown void resting directly above the Grand Gallery. Stretching at least 30 meters long, the space wasn't a flaw or a natural crack. It was deliberate, carved with intent, and then sealed for millennia. When the discovery was published in Nature in 2017, the world paused. Was this an undiscovered chamber, an echo of a lost construction phase, or something even older? Some researchers noted its perfect alignment with the gallery below, suggesting a kind of mirrored architecture, perhaps a resonant cavity designed to interact with the space beneath. Others whispered about legends of a hidden archive, a record left behind by a civilization predating the pharaohs. Egypt's authorities responded cautiously. Calls for drilling or further exploration were denied, officially to protect the monument. But the silence only fueled speculation, because this new void, this silent, secret chamber, seemed to whisper the same message as the pyramid's harmonic architecture and its cosmic alignments. There is more here than history admits. And as we continue deeper into the sleeping heart of Giza, modern science begins to unearth a world lost beneath time. A world that may rewrite everything we think we know about the builders who lived before history opened its eyes. 14. The Orion Blueprint. For years, officials insisted that any new anomalies inside the Great Pyramid must remain unexamined. An attempt, some whispered, to protect the narrative rather than the stone. Yet silence never stops discovery. In 2023, updated moon imaging peeled back another layer of mystery. A long, hidden corridor, nearly 9 meters in length, tucked behind the northern face of the pyramid, positioned above the ancient entrance. When researchers built a 3D model of the find, the pathway appeared to lead straight into a closed chamber, its purpose unknown, its walls untouched since the dawn of antiquity. When a tiny camera was threaded through a micro-perforation, it revealed smooth limestone sealed in timeless stillness. No hieroglyphs, no tools, no signs of intrusion, just deliberate emptiness, waiting. At the same time, ground-penetrating radar swept across the base of the pyramid, began returning strange data, straight linear anomalies running beneath the plateau in grid-like patterns. These weren't random cracks or natural formations. Nature rarely creates right angles beneath Giza. Some of the voids stretched deep beneath the surface, more than 40 meters down, even dipping into the region between the pyramid and the Sphinx. A few connected to known shafts, but continued far beyond their mapped endpoints, as though they were parts of a forgotten labyrinth. Could these be geological fissures? Perhaps. But Giza's past has always resisted easy explanations. History itself hints that these underground realms were once known. In the 5th century BCE, the Greek historian Herodotus described passages beneath the Great Pyramid, and even a water-filled chamber said to house Khufu's remains on a central island. Scholars dismissed this as fanciful storytelling, until modern surveys confirmed the presence of large, waterlogged cavities beneath the pyramid's foundation, pools of ancient groundwater sealed for thousands of years. In 1837, Colonel Howard Vyse, the same explorer who uncovered Khufu's cartouche, blasted his way into a deep pit below the descending passage and found a crude, unfinished chamber carved straight into the bedrock. It resembled a tomb, only in shape. There was no sarcophagus, no inscriptions, no offerings. Some engineers now argue that this lower chamber could be far older than the pyramid above it, perhaps part of an earlier construction phase, swallowed by the later monument. Throughout the 1800s, explorers reported hints of deeper mysteries, French archaeologist Auguste Mariette wrote of labyrinthine tunnels stretching away from the Sphinx toward the Nile. Notes from early 20th century expeditions mention strange drafts of air emanating from sealed stone doors, as if hidden passageways still breathed beneath the desert. These stories drifted into obscurity, overshadowed by the grandeur rising above the sands. Then geology entered the conversation. Core samples taken across the Giza Plateau revealed thick layers of Nile silt trapped between bedrock strata, evidence of massive ancient flooding. The last time the Nile rose that high was during the Younger Dryas, around 11,000 to 12,000 years ago, an era linked to global cataclysmic floods. If structures existed beneath the plateau at that time, they could have been submerged, buried, and preserved under thousands of years of sediment before the pharaohs ever arrived. This idea gained strength in 1992, when seismic mapping by geophysicist Thomas Dobecki and Egyptologist John Anthony West uncovered rectangular, perfectly symmetrical cavities beneath the Sphinx's left paw, artificial spaces unmistakably carved by intelligent hands. Within days, officials halted all further study. When pressed for answers, their reply was brief and final. No additional investigation planned. Those hidden chambers remain sealed in silence to this very day. And so the question grows, what lies beneath Giza? Were these tunnels mere storage spaces, construction ramps, or ritual pathways meant to emulate the pharaoh's journey through the Duat? Or do they belong to something older, something that predates even Egypt's first kings? A handful of researchers believe these networks may once have housed an ancient archive, a repository of knowledge preserved against catastrophe. Legends speak of a hall of records buried somewhere near the Sphinx, safeguarding the wisdom of a vanished civilization. Fantastic? Perhaps. But radar imaging has indeed confirmed a large sealed cavity beneath that exact area. Whether it holds mythic records or something more mundane, the undeniable truth is this: a hidden chamber exists there, untouched and unexplored, and this pattern keeps repeating. Every scan, every survey, every new technological breakthrough whispers the same revelation. The Giza Plateau is hollow beneath its skin, threaded with chambers and corridors that challenge the idea of a simple pyramid built on solid rock. The ancient builders didn't just raise monuments, they carved downward as much as they built upward, shaping a world beneath the desert as intricate as the one above it. If the Great Pyramid is only the visible peak of a much larger, buried design, then its true story may lie deep below the sand, among tunnels older than dynasties, carved by hands that vanished before history began. Perhaps the early pharaohs discovered these primordial passageways and claimed them as their inheritance, constructing their own monuments atop a legacy they only half understood. Imagine wandering across the plateau at night, unaware that beneath your footsteps stretches a vast, silent underworld. Corridors descending into darkness, chambers sealed since the dawn of human memory, walls etched with symbols now erased by time. They lie waiting, perfectly preserved, like the forgotten hard drives of an ancient world. And somewhere within that darkness may rest the final missing piece, the clue that reveals whether the Great Pyramid was truly crafted by the Egyptians, or whether they inherited the blueprint from a civilization far older, one whose memory lingers only in stone, in myth, and in the stars above Orion. In the next and final chapter, we follow that thread to its deepest conclusion. Chapter 15, The Empty Chamber That Roars. Dawn glides over the Giza Plateau like a slow-moving wave of light, brushing the tip of the Great Pyramid and turning the ancient limestone into a shimmering crown of gold. The world beyond is still half asleep, Cairo barely stirring, the desert holding its breath. While beneath this quiet horizon lies the echo of something far older than the pharaohs themselves. For thousands of years, this colossal monument has stood in silence, almost as if it has been waiting for a moment in history when humankind would finally possess the tools, the curiosity, and the patience to listen. By now, we've wandered through the cracks in the traditional narrative, the suspiciously painted name of Khufu, the dating methods that collapse under scrutiny, engineering that seems centuries ahead of the Bronze Age, precision so exact it borders on impossible, alignments with stars from a prehistoric sky, and tunnels that plunge into forbidden depths. Every thread points toward the same haunting mystery. Who truly built this? And what disaster swept their world away? Across cultures, scattered myths seem to echo fragments of the same ancient trauma. Stories of a world drowned, burned, shattered. Plato wrote of Atlantis, erased in a single night around 11,600 years ago. The same era scientists now connect to the younger Dryas, when a sudden global melt drowned coastlines and reshaped climate across the planet. Egyptian priests told Plato that their own ancestors were not the beginning of civilization, but the survivors of an older age, keepers of scraps left behind after fire and flood. They spoke of the Shemsu Hor, the followers of Horus, not gods, but people from a vanished epoch whose knowledge later became myth. If those are just stories, Earth's geology whispers the same tale with colder certainty. Around 12,800 years ago, ice cores in Greenland record a dramatic spike in platinum, evidence of a cosmic impact. Microscopic diamonds, melted minerals, and glass spherules show up across continents. Sea levels shot upward more than 100 meters as the world thawed in a geological instant. If any advanced society existed before this reset, call it Atlantis or something nameless, most of their cities, ports, and libraries would have been swallowed whole. Only stone could endure. Survivors may have sought refuge where the floods did not reach. Highlands, river valleys, the fertile cradle of the Nile. And perhaps they carried with them fragments of a lost science. Astronomy, geometry, acoustics, trying desperately to preserve what little remained. In that light, the Great Pyramid ceases to be a tomb and becomes something else entirely. A message, a monument designed to outlive time, encoding knowledge in the only material capable of surviving catastrophe. And then the numbers begin to hum together like distant strings of a forgotten melody. The Orion alignment pointing back to 10,500 Bikur, the end of the Younger Dryas around 9,600 BC, the sudden rise of sophisticated sites like Göbekli Tepe, appearing with startling precision and celestial purpose. These are not random sparks. They are embers of the same ancient flame, flickering back to life in scattered hands. The builders of the Great Pyramid may have been the inheritors of this flame, refugees of a lost age who transformed their memory into stone. In their design, everything carried meaning. Limestone representing earth, granite marking energy and resonance, corridors mapping the soul's ascent, geometry as a universal language, ratios as memory. Perhaps they even knew the people of their own time would not grasp it. Maybe this monument wasn't built for them at all, but for whoever would find it after the next great turning of the cycle. A vault of knowledge, disguised as a monument. Cycles of destruction appear in every ancient culture. Hindu yugas, Mayan suns, the Egyptian flood of Nun. Even modern science now acknowledges repeating cataclysms every 12,000 years. Climate shocks, magnetic anomalies, impact events. If the Great Pyramid truly dates back to that previous cycle, its builders understood something we are only beginning to rediscover: that civilization is not a straight path upward, but a wheel. We rise, we collapse, we forget, and then slowly, we return. Maybe that is why the pyramid still stands so defiantly, while ages crumble around it, not as a relic of one vanished world, but as the heartbeat of many. Its silence is deliberate, its precision a language we have not yet fully learned to translate. And those mysterious voids hidden deep within, those empty spaces that seem to hum back at the instruments that probe them, perhaps they are more than hollow chambers. Perhaps they hold a record written not on scrolls, but in vibration itself, waiting for the moment when someone listens the right way. For now, the monument waits, exactly as it has waited for millennia. Each morning the sun climbs its face just as it did thousands of years before the first pharaoh was born. The earth spins, ages pass, civilizations rise and vanish, but the pyramid remains the still point in the turning world. Maybe that is its final message, that it was not built for the dead, but for the living. A mirror for those who come after. A reminder, quiet, patient, eternal, that we have walked this path before. And as another night settles over Giza, its shadow stretches toward the stars it once mirrored so perfectly. Silent, timeless, watching, waiting for us not to discover something new, but to remember something ancient. Final thought. In my view, this story stands out because it doesn't try to force a conclusion. It invites a deeper kind of curiosity. Instead of shouting for attention, it whispers, and that whisper feels far more unsettling. It exposes the uneasiness we all feel when something enormous refuses to fit into the explanations we've been given. The Great Pyramid, in your narrative, becomes less of a monument and more of a mirror. It reflects the limits of our certainty, the gaps in our history, and the possibility that ancient humanity was far older, far stranger, and far more capable than we assume. What I appreciate most is the balance between skepticism and wonder. You don't push conspiracy. You highlight anomalies, contradictions, and unanswered questions that genuinely deserve attention. And in the quiet, almost dreamlike tone of your story, those questions become haunting. It makes me feel that the pyramid isn't just a relic of the past, but a reminder that our understanding of human civilization may only be scratching the surface. The mystery becomes not something frightening, but something beautiful, an invitation to keep looking deeper long after the story ends.